Hello, Union Bridge. I hope you are all staying safe and well. In today's sermon, I want to talk about Corinthians 1:13, which says, "But now faith, hope, love. Abide these three, but the greatest of these is love." I want to look at this isolated verse, this definite statement, because there's quite a bit that can be unpacked here. In this time being distant from one another, there's a lot of life that we can still live, even in the midst of stagnancy and perhaps uncertainty. In the space that we are waiting, we can reflect on and refine our love. And in this process, we can even find inspiration, peace, and relief in places where we had struggled. One of the most important takeaways from the Bible is to love one another. We are given instructions on how to do so, testimonies, and parables throughout the book. We all receive the word differently, but as we are challenged to navigate and interpret this maze of text, it is clear the importance of sharing love and showing love. In Matthew 22:36-39, a Pharisee had asked Jesus, "Master, which is the great commandment in the law?" And Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." And it's no wonder God had emphasized the need for us to love him and one another. Studies such as those conducted by researchers at Carnegie Mellon University and Ohio State University Medical Center have determined that expressing and receiving love lowers stress, blood pressure, anxiety, and even reduces the chance of catching a cold. We are basically crafted for love, designed meticulously to desire giving and receiving it. In Corinthians, Paul aims to correct the corrupt ways of the Church of Corinth by explaining God's idea of love. When reading 1 Corinthians 13:13, I really liked what my Bible's notation said about this particular verse. It read, "Faith is the foundation and content of God's message. Hope is the attitude and focus. Love is the action." Thus, just because love is the action, just because love is the greatest of these, does not mean that we can dismiss hope and faith, nor undermine its relevance to how we love one another. In an analysis done of this verse by Joe Holland, the passage is put into perspective through the analogy of a baker. Holland wrote, "A baker will tell you that the critical elements of bread are yeast, water, flour, and salt. If we agree that unsalted bread is rather bland, and conclude that salt is the greatest of these four, then we will run into problems with our bread as we pay less attention to adding flour, yeast, and water. Likewise, love that is not balanced by faith and hope undermines the very definition of biblical love. We know that hope and faith are critical to our relationship with God, ourselves, and others, but with this analogy, it's emphasized that these things are necessary for how we go about loving one another. We need hope and faith to be taken into account when we spread our love. We need purpose for our love. We need that destination, that goal for why we love. We need a firm belief in God to have strength when we feel challenged by love. Hope and faith motivate and guide, and love is the action. When reading a part of the book Inspired, written by Rachel Held Evans, I was reminded of something important that maybe we sometimes overlook. The Bible was written for the people of the time, and when we especially consider that Paul was writing in the form of letters, we see that of course Paul's words would be written in a direct manner toward a specific intended audience. Yet today, we see it all the time. People reaching back to specific moments speckled throughout the Bible, trying to enforce it in hateful ways, as if it survives in the modern day where it wasn't planned to. These verses are pitted against select people and groups of people and used as justification to not love them to the fullest, to not love them the way that God had intended us to love one another. In order to understand the love that we must give to others, we must first understand God's love for us. It's unfailing, forgiving, and compassionate. It's an extraordinary gift. We see God's love when we wake up in the morning, in the people we meet, and in the very fact that we can possess hope and love. We can see it in the smallest intricacies in nature. Watching our life unfold before us is the same as watching God's love unravel before our eyes. And how amazing love is, just as an entity that exists in this world. Love cannot be contained, and no matter how much we examine, simplify, or explain the nature of love, The subjective phenomena we individually experience will always exceed any boundaries that we try to restrict love to. When reflecting on loving the way that God has called us to love, I feel it's easiest to focus on how vast our love is, taking into consideration how many people we are reaching, asking ourselves how far our love spans and who is actively receiving it. This, of course, is important, as we are called to love everyone. Every human on earth is called to participate in life, to use their talents, their love, their personality to affect those around them. And while we're still here, still living and breathing, opportunity is still available. We remain because purpose still remains. But we must also ask ourselves, how deep does our love run? Through the baker's analogy of needing all the ingredients to bake bread, we learn that love without faith and hope is baseless and perhaps even misguided. But the Bible has been prepared for us to help us define love. It tells us what it is and what it isn't. It helps us avoid giving out a shallow, half-hearted love. 1 Corinthians 13:4-8 tells us, "Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking, and it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails." Even when we add some contextualization and take into consideration the time that the Bible was written in, we can still clearly see that the core lessons remain. We see over and over again in the Bible and in the modern day that love is timeless, that it prevails in times of darkness, when our hearts are heavy, and when the future is clouded to us. There are so many things in this world to be divided on, and there is not enough time in our lifespan to find all our answers, to prove ourselves right every single time. But there's always time to share love. Every day there's a space for love to fill and exist in, no matter the circumstances, the condition, or the setting we find ourselves at. There's always room for love to make a presence. How can we love one another during this time? Love can be quiet. It can be holding back anger when you're annoyed with something. It can be patience when someone does something that you don't understand. But love can also be loud. Love can be a movement, a change. It can be taking the time out of your day to talk to someone feeling lonely, or starting your own campaign online for change about something you strongly believe in. No matter how you love, make sure that your love is heard, that your love is an action, that is backed by hope and faith and meaning. We can all benefit from sharing a love that is pure and in line with God's ideals. When we lower judgment and increase our capacity for love, a miracle happens. We move closer to God's intentions, and we create valuable relationships with one another. And with those relationships, we can accomplish more. You never know who is going to be helpful to reaching your goals and living out God's plan. And in turn, you never know who you may help that will go on to change the world. So let's simply love with a full heart and see where it takes us.